where you said that about the menstrual cycle leave.
Yes.
That whole thing, it was so interesting because you said, and I'm going to quote, you said menstrual cycles are not a handicap. And I was like, yeah, yes. Because uh, I got into the workforce.
I could have said much more.
You could.
I didn't. Because the gentleman who asked the question never intended to find a solution for women.
So it was Professor Manoj Kumar Jha. And he says, will the Minister of Women and
Just
Child
allow
Development
me
be
to
pleased
just
to
look at
state?
this. Can you look at part C of the question?
Yeah, whether the policy contains provisions to promote and provide for menstrual hygiene among LGBTQIA community.
Now tell me, the LGBTQIA community that the honorable member wanted a response for, which gay man without a uterus has a menstrual cycle? So the question was intended either to shock or to provoke or to attract attention, which it did attract attention.
Yeah.
It did shock many people. It did provoke a controversy. But the question in itself indicates to you what the intent is.
But you also said as a woman who's menstruating.
Yes, but like I said, if I talk now outside Parliament and I have to reflect on it as a female professional, the LGBTQIA plus, he wants me, Manoj Jha wants me to provide an answer about how can I provide for their menstrual hygiene.
For gay men.
Which, for gay men, is it applicable? The second issue is, he says in his communication that Bihar has a policy of menstrual leave.
Which is not here visible.
He said this on the floor of the House.
But didn't
that-
mention it in.
Yeah. So if you look at this question alone, allow me to go back to it. If you go back to this question alone,
Whether the government is planning to roll out.
there is a policy which is, if you look at my answer, it talks
Yeah.
about a policy which is available on a website. The issue is, in his verbal intervention, he says Bihar has a policy. He insinuates as though Bihar is an overarching policy which is applicable to the private sector. His question to me is,
Bihar doesn't?
doesn't have a private sector policy. The chair can pull him up for lying or insinuating.
Misrepresenting.
Yep.
Okay.
But what measures are in place to make compulsory for employers to grant leave? So Bihar may have in 1992 a policy for paid leave for women in government. Does not have it in the private sector.
Huh.
I've never had, and in my experience, I'm not the health minister. What did I say that day? I said, one, it is not an handicapped position that women have. Somebody said, आपने handicap क्यों बोला? I said, आप अंग्रेजी की कोई डिक्शनरी उठा के देख लीजिए, उसका दूसरा सिनोनिम impediment है. तो मैंने वो दोनों शब्द का इस्तेमाल किया, मैंने disability नहीं बोला इसको. फिर उन्होंने आपको पता नहीं है कि पेन होता है. अच्छा, interestingly, it's all men. Somebody, in fact, you tweeted about it. Some gentleman wanted to take out my uterus because I had such a position.
He
Now,
said, actually.
I take umbrage
that
on
was
it for
twist.
3 reasons.
Oh.
One, the whole movement of feminism was so that women can have their opinion voiced themselves, no matter what the consequence. So for somebody to say, I'm a feminist man, and because you have an opinion which is different from mine, your uterus should be taken out, is an oxymoron unto itself.
Yeah, God help his family and those who are working in his organization.
The fact that he can do it with impunity with somebody on a constitutional post means there is much more that he could possibly do with people around him,
Yeah.
working with him or within his family. That itself is a frightening proposition for those women.
Yeah.
But what is the issue at hand? I have unionized in media as a professional many issues, as a writer, as a producer, as an allied worker for people who work behind the screen. And our intent for 25 years has been, as members of a union then, that we don't want to create new challenges for women where they get harassed,
Yeah.
or for that matter, where they are getting discriminated against. So imagine when a parliamentarian tells me that mandate a national policy, and I tell them that मैं वो मंत्री नहीं हूँ, वो health minister है.
Yeah.
लेकिन when you say that mandate leave across all segments, what does it do? For you to mandate and make it lawfully implemented, people have to report implementation.
Yeah.
Now imagine a scenario in a private sector, okay, where if somebody has to implement it, your HR guy has to know. Your accounts guy has to know. Why should a woman's menstrual cycle be known to an employer? Imagine if it's a single woman who chooses not to take those leaves that are so-called proposed to be granted. Can you imagine the harassment that woman will have to face?
Yeah.
Third,
especially on the work floor, right?
can you
Yeah,
imagine?
3
We
days
are
not
saying
being
more
there.
and more women have to come and join the workforce, especially on factory floors, corporate houses. Imagine a floor with 20,000 women.
Yeah.
So we are creating new barriers for discrimination. What this gentleman, when he asked me the question, never told anybody. In fact, what never came out in any critique was that under the Occupational Safety and Health Standards rules of 2020, medical leave is already provided for.
Yeah.
What nobody spoke about is that if you forget Indian institutions, if you look at research which is coming from, let's say, a Mayo Clinic, what do they say? 80 to 85% women face it in their life cycle.
Yeah.
If it persists beyond the age of 25, you need a checkup, you need a pap check, you need a pelvic examination.
Which is a medical issue then.
It's a medical issue. It is shocking that it's less in married women, more in young girls.
Yeah.
So the issue is you're creating newer layers for women to be humiliated. You're creating new layers for discrimination. You're creating more reasons for them to say, Arey, pehle we used to deny them because they're getting married. Then they are being denied because they're having babies. Now you're giving them a monthly reason to deny them equal opportunity. So when I spoke in Parliament, I spoke from my personal experience because I don't want more and more women harassed. But the question is it not provided for in the law? It is a part of law already.
Yeah.
It is only under the context of medical leave, which is true because if you look at the challenge with regards to severe pain, that is an indication of a hormone or chemical imbalance or a genetic inclination to it, which means you need a doctor immediately. You can't self-medicate, especially if it is above the age of 25.
It became political because you had K. Kavita saying, as a
I
woman,
don't
it is
expect
appalling.
her to be socially or politically mature. What I'm shocked at is the number of men who had an opinion about an experience as a working professional that I had had. I was very clear on the floor of the House. This is my personal experience.
But there's a woman too. I mean, you're saying man, but she's a woman politician and she
Like I
says
said, I don't expect social or political maturity from her. I have deducted in my experience of working with her as an opposition member, most of them fancy the headline. They don't fancy the content that provides a solution. Even the gentleman who asked the question, why would you ask me a question about providing menstrual hygiene for gay men? The intent was never to provide a solution or to start a conversation.
And then there was that
He's
tweet.
asking me in part 1 of his supplementary about the plastic composition of manufacturing of sanitary pads. You would presume, and this is records available, that Mr. Jha knows that I'm not manufacturing pads. So the intent was to create a headline, possibly get featured in one of those brute videos.
Which happened.
Which happened. And it's easier to do when the person who's responding is as blunt as I am.
Click here to watch the full episode.